Thank you, Dave. This is the fourth summit that I have not organized, which is a terrific relief. And congratulations today for putting on a great show. The shows have got better since I started organizing the conferences, and that's up to Dave. So congratulations. What I've been doing over the last few years is also thinking about what comes next. And what I want to share with you today are some reflections on that journey that I'm embarking on, which is really trying to think what the lean contribution can be in thinking through into the next digital age. It's clear that things are going to change quite fundamentally. It's clear that we've got a lot of work to do. It's clear that we could become irrelevant, or we could be extremely relevant in helping organizations and individuals find a productive way forward. So that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the things we need to overcome and the things that we need to create and what they might look like. I don't know what's coming. I don't know the answers, but out of our lean, reflecting on our experience with lean over the last 20, 30 years, I think there are certainly some things that we can contribute and actually increase our relevance to thinking through the role of the lean in the digital age. So, beyond legacy assets and beyond legacy mindsets. This is where we've been working. And we've had a lot of experience of sorting out and unscrambling manufacturing sites. We've had a lot of experience, too, even seeing flow enter the aircraft industry. Flow at Boeing, flow at Airbus, and flow in many other aerospace operations. That's been a major step forward. We've had a lot of experience with slimming down the size of huge, uncomplicated warehouses, although they seem to spring up just as fast as we reduce them. And we've had a lot of experience with fast-moving consumer goods and rapid replenishment, increasingly in hospitals and increasingly also in the knowledge work side of call center activities, and at airports and construction. And the ship is a representation of the other legacy asset we have, which is extraordinarily complicated and extended global supply chains. So these are the assets that are the result of mass production thinking that we have tried to ameliorate and tried to make work. So they're the legacy assets, the big warehouses, the big factories, the big hospitals, the big airports, and so on that I banged on about for quite some time, that are not part of the future. But what comes next, of course, is an open question. So those are the legacy assets. Easy to see, easy to describe. We've all been there. That's where we've been living for the last 20 years, in helping those organizations make sense and streamline, to a certain degree, the performance of those assets. What's more subtle, actually, and more difficult to remove and to move beyond are the legacy mindsets. Frederick Taylor is still alive in all of our brains and our behaviors. And not just the familiar command and control, which absolutely describes most traditional management systems, but the flip side of command and control, of course, is compliance. And compliance by employees to do what the system tells them they should be doing rather than doing the right things often. And compliance on part of the customers as well, in that you take the product, this product, through this channel, served in this way, because that's what's on offer. So that mindset is, I think, very familiar to us, and we live it day to day. And it's very pervasive, and it's very deeply ingrained in how we think about organizations. And, I've been extremely critical of that. But I think the more significant legacy of Taylor has been the flip side of the fact that a few experts decide what needs doing and tells everybody else what to do, of course, is that change comes through those experts thinking through what comes next and telling everybody designing the systems, the assets, the locations, the behaviors, the structures that people have got to work in next. So change has been driven traditionally by experts, often even lean experts. I'll come in, I'll sort your website out, I'll sort your supply chain out, I'll sort your factory out, and I'll do it for you, to you, for you as managers, to people, and we know that that's a very Tayloristic way of actually operating. Also, so it's experts that drive change through projects, and where possible, automating people out of the way, with a dream that that will become more stable, but in fact the reality is it becomes less stable. So that's the true legacy of Taylor, actually, is this idea that change is driven and being the responsibility of a few experts who then design away from the Gemba what happens and create the structures that we try and work in. So that's one set of legacy mindset. The other legacy mindset, of course, is managed by the numbers from Jack Welch. And we're all here because we made our numbers, I guess. And that's the way the world works, and we're not going to change that, but that's a very, very powerful mental model. And the significance of that is make the numbers, I don't care how you do it. It's not about improving the means to generate better results, which is the lean approach. It's actually, I don't care how you do it, just make the numbers. And we make the numbers, and everybody fiddles the numbers, of course. And the final legacy mindset is Michael Porter, of course, who trained organizations, and Harvard does this, tells organizations how to escape the competition and dominate a market and charge a premium. And that's how you make money, rather than create value for customers. So I think those are the three mindsets that are much more deeply ingrained than the legacy assets we've got. We can actually unbuild shopping centers, big distribution centers, in a couple of weeks. You can unplug them, you can take them apart, and clear the site very quickly. But these assets last a lot longer. So that's our challenge. That's the problem we face in thinking beyond the assets that we currently have, which are a reflection of the mass production age. So, but let's reflect on the example that has provided the food for this whole lean movement. The practices in Toyota. And Toyota is still a stunning example. They're one of the few organizations that has actually come to dominate a mature industry. During the time when technology really didn't change in that industry, they dominated that industry by, if you like, cumulative Kaizen, by simply working on the detail, creating stability and improving day by day by day by day the production process, the design process, and basically beating everybody else at that game. So if you like, it's the cumulative Kaizen of everybody able to improve their current processes every day. That's quite staggering that happened in a totally mature industry. And then in the 90s, the mid-90s, AG Toyota said, we are going to find an alternative to the internal combustion engine. There are 5 different routes, and we're going to follow all of them. And we're going to lead in whatever of those 5 become possible right now. Hybrid was the first. They just launched a fuel cell car in California. And that, I think, the ability to do that built on the cumulative Kaizen experience of the processes. They had deep knowledge of the processes. They had a big vision from AG, who said, this is the direction we're going to go. A totally different direction against all of the opinion in the car industry. I remember going to Bosch, and the Bosch guys telling me, no, the future is diesel. These are just crazy ideas. Now Bosch has one of the biggest hybrid research departments. So, big vision, cumulative Kaizen, but deep technical knowledge that resulted in focusing on delivering on that big vision. Interesting. And now, have you been to Toyota's website and looked at Toyota's current vision? And if you haven't, I recommend you do. You won't read it, you can't be able to read this. Go and have a look at it. It is an extraordinarily well-crafted vision. And I've extracted just 2 lines from that vision. The first line is that Toyota will lead the way to the future of mobility. So defining the value quite differently. And Toyota is determined to lead the way and is conducting experiments across the globe with all kinds of aspects of mobility. Connected cities, driverless cars, all of those kinds of things. So Toyota's vision is really broad. Big vision, cumulative Kaizen, deep technical knowledge, but continuing, they will achieve that vision, the last line is, by engaging the talents and passion of people. So the idea of making people before making cars and creating value for society is still actually at the core of the Toyota vision. That's a fairly unique example, and we shouldn't kind of just dismiss it and think, because it's the car industry, it's old hat and part of the old pre-digital age. Not at all. The hybrid alone has more lines of code in it than the F-16 or the F-22 even. So they were able to incorporate digital technology and digital design technology now in meeting these future challenges, which are all going to be about integrating information with the car and the network and the neighborhoods and so on. So very interesting. We shouldn't lose sight of that model. Foundation of people, cumulative Kaizen, deep technical knowledge, big vision. Now, when I look at the digital disruption, and you hear lots and lots of people talk in Porter-type language of you've got to dominate and die, you're going to be disrupted out of business like tomorrow. Yeah, that could happen. But actually, the results so far from the initial round of big digital giants is that they grew extraordinarily quickly. They did some amazing things, no question. But as they grew into big corporations, they began to face all the same problems of a traditional big corporations. And actually, very similar problems of managing a supply chain, of developing a next generation product, of writing the software. Interesting, very interesting innovations in all of those pieces, but actually very traditional in terms of, very uninspiring, if you like, in terms of the management of a management model of the future. Very traditional if you look inside. So I think they're frankly disappointing. The one thing that is really interesting is the Amazon and Google is breaking down their systems into small increments and updating those and going through rapid replenishment cycle, rapid improvement cycles every day with their software. We'll come back to that. So absolutely, there are really good things we can learn from them, but by and large, the management model is fairly traditional. And now you have very interesting competition. The head of Bosch, not so long ago, said their competitor now in the future is Google. The whole Internet of Things, the whole transport infrastructure issue, they provide the hardware, Google provides the software, and both sides are trying to now get into the other half of the game. So you're seeing Toyota, Bosch, a lot of these companies actually having to, from the hardware side, learn how to build the models of the future, products and services of the future, and likewise Google is getting into hardware, and Amazon too. So that's kind of interesting. And then we had the startup movement, the lean startup movement, which I think has been terrific. It's terrific in that it really honed in on one piece of the Toyota knowledge, which is breaking the work into small increments and rapid replenishment, rapid test cycles, so rapid learning cycles, as rapid as possible learning cycles, and then adjusting based upon that learning cycle. And that really is a very, very powerful, important piece of the story. It misses, for me, the piece of finding and framing what to build, and the whole, how does the customer integrate this new product or service or knowledge into their process of solving their problems. But nevertheless, it's a very important piece, a very important contribution, and links back to Amazon and Google developing their software in small increments very frequently using rapid learning cycles and validated learning. And this book I talked about last year, The Second Machine Age, really good, thoughtful reflection on the future of digital technology. But as you read it, you discover that, in fact, the mental model of the organization they're talking about is classic Taylor. It's a CEO who will decide what to do, and it will be implemented through systems. And I don't think that's how it's going to work. And they also, to be fair, they also, on the other side, say that the pace of the adoption of digital technologies actually isn't constrained by the technical possibilities, it's constrained by the social organization to deliver that and by the customer acceptance. So I think it's a very thoughtful book, quite right, but they're not experts in management. Why would we expect them to be? But it's very dangerous if we just design organizations from thinking about technical capabilities alone. And so I think those are two aspects that the Lean movement can really create a parallel vision that actually gels with the technical opportunities and actually enables those technical opportunities to be realized in a way that both is acceptable and productive for society. So, 3 contributions the Lean movement can make. The first is that we've seen over the last several years a growing realization not only that Lean is practice, but Lean is practice in order to learn. So learning has been at the absolute core of differentiating Lean from all of the other improvement methods. And talking to a company and saying, would you rather have a half a dozen process improvement experts going around essentially firefighting, or would you have all of your employees practicing and learning how to stabilize their work and then conduct daily Kaizen, daily improvements on that work, create an army of problem solvers? Well, actually there's no contest. The army of problem solvers is going to win. But how do you do that, and how do you support that is the management challenge. And I think Michael Ballet's book, Lead with Respect, if you haven't read it, you should read it, gave us part of the answer, the personal journey answer, to what it takes to change the mental models that we have in our head in order to be able to lead such an organization. It's not the whole story. It doesn't claim to be the whole story. We need a management system. We need daily management, and we need Hoshin and all of those other things. But what's missing is the human side, the human experience side of learning to lead by questioning, by challenging, by enabling, by unblocking. Now I think we know now, and it's well written, and it's well documented. And the other pieces of management system are also well documented. We still have to deepen our experience of them. But what is really interesting when you think about learning and you see how people leading this way learn new things, it tells me that management's job isn't just to solve problems, it's to learn and to coach people to solve problems. Management learns by observing and doing that coaching, observing what the real situation is. And it therefore learns to face up to issues and problems that previously didn't want to see, couldn't see, to frame them, to find them, and to frame them. And that's that cycle, that's very, very important piece of the problem-solving piece. And that's management's task. And management actually can't, in most organizations that are in a very chaotic situation, cannot actually really see the problems, the deep problems. But as you engage in problem solving and supporting the front line and solving their immediate problems, you begin to see how to frame questions and frame problems. So I think that's the central message about organization design in the future is how do we design it so people learn and enable the front line in particular to learn. We are here to support the value creation process. Okay, the second insight that was quite interesting, I've been going back into construction and following the current debates about construction, because we now have a situation in which, for instance, the infrastructure, all countries need to renew a tremendous amount of infrastructure. The tax base is never going to rise. In fact, it's probably going to fall. So we're going to have to learn to do more with less. And the construction firms have been doing great things on site organization and just-in-time delivery of materials and manufacture and fabrication of parts and erection of buildings and so on. Great, are now realizing that actually that's not the problem anymore. The problem is the business model of projects, in which a tremendous amount of expensive expert time is spent in defining a deal and then negotiating every change during the build, and then in fighting afterwards to decide who actually pays for what. That expensive nonsense is a consequence of a project model, and they're beginning to realize we need to move away from projects to build a relationship with clients to co-manage a stream of work of several different similar projects as a stream. So they're moving away. The construction industry, big time, is thinking of moving away from projects. And likewise, the software industry, likewise, the whole agile movement and so on, software development movement, is also moving away from projects, from old traditional waterfall design projects, to actually working, to integrating design and operations and support and speeding that up. Small incremental steps, rapid testing of feedback, and so on. That begins to look much more like a stream. And you talk to them about actually managing delivery streams, and they say, yeah, we'll get away from projects. So my hunch is that projects themselves, the whole idea of project management is a legacy from mass production age. Even Toyota's development project is actually a stream, delivering a new product every 4 years. It's a product and process stream. And we need to manage it as such. So the world is actually going to need to move towards thinking of most activities, even in development, as a series of streams. Okay, so how do we organize to support those streams? And so far we've said, well, you need a chief engineer. And you need strong cross-functional activities. And you need all the project management, lean product development stuff we've been talking about, and is well written up in places like Al Ward's book. But trying to do that and fix existing organizations to actually manage around streams, that's actually pretty hard. So where can we look for examples where people have rethought, particularly in a knowledge management environment, have rethought what the organization ought to look like? And I was at a Lean IT Summit in Paris a couple of weeks ago and heard a stunning example, I'm not saying a model, but an example that begins to provoke you to think about just these issues. And it was an example from Spotify, the music streaming service in Stockholm. They have 75 teams, or squads as they call them, of 6 to 8 people. That's a big business. That's a scaled-up startup, absolutely. And they have rethought their business around those teams that create the value. And each team member also is a member of a chapter. So each squad member, it's the work team, is a member of a chapter of his technical expertise. So he's also getting up to date and connecting with the best practice of his technological knowledge to contribute to the work of the team. And so they're organized in squads, in chapters, and then clusters of squads form tribes. Tribes are a set of teams focused on a particular customer delivery or support activity. So interesting. We wouldn't use the language of squads, chapters, and tribes, but we are thinking about teams, and we are thinking about how do we develop deeper knowledge, technical knowledge, as well as collaborative knowledge, Kaizen knowledge, if you like, and mastery of that. And we are, which is the two elements of the T learning in Toyota, deep knowledge and collaborative knowledge, if you like. And the tribes are organized around purpose. So I almost think that this purpose mastery Kaizen is actually more useful than the purpose, process, people thing we've been talking about over the last few years. And you should go and watch the video yourselves. This is a terrific video, really interesting case, where they've also upturned their reporting structure and turned it into a supporting structure and defined any activity that supports the works of the squads as leadership. Any activity that deepens the mastery of those chapter members is leadership. Anything that clarifies and integrates and synchronizes the delivery of purpose is leadership. Now that's very interesting. They basically deconstructed and figured out a different way of organizing around around knowledge, developing knowledge of working together, technical knowledge, and the delivery of purpose. So we have to look, I think, in that world where people have built new organizations that have grown up from the digital, from startups, for ways of challenging us to rethink the way we deploy knowledgeable, talented people in an environment which I think is a knowledge environment. I don't think the distinction between physical work and knowledge work is actually coming together. Everything is knowledge work now. So the third, final contribution that Lean actually can make is something Jim and I have been banging on for a long time, and that's the distinction between truly thinking back from how the customer solves their problems, rather than thinking forward of what can I sell the customer, which is actually, unfortunately, what most people do. And that's a very difficult leap to make, to really think through and recognize that the customer themselves goes through a process to solve their problems. And what we do has an impact on that process. It reflected in our provision process. Jim and I described a methodology for doing that in Lean Solutions. It was way ahead of its time. Nobody really paid attention, but it's relevant now. So let me give you two examples. I've been involved in a startup, Elastra. You might have read the article on Planet Lean the other day. And to me, the lessons, and it's still a startup, and it's still 3 people, and they're gradually, I think, going to make it, but who knows? But the lesson from the first year is that one of the reasons they were successful so far is that they actually were users. And it was because, as users, they couldn't find the solution to this problem of developing a standardizable e-commerce platform, scalable on the cloud and all the rest of it. They knew what they wanted because they had been the customers. And in developing a platform, they figured out the right technical elements. It had to be on the cloud, it had to use Magento and so on, don't need to bother with all that sort of stuff. And it also had to be customizable. It has to be so easy that you as a customer can put your e-commerce platform up and running in 30 minutes. And it's very fast, much faster than existing platforms, and it's adaptable, immediately adaptable, all the time. You don't have to wait till the night to do it. So the point, and just for this example, is they have been users. So they're absolutely feeding back from not only their time as potential users, frustrated users looking for this solution, but also they have hourly, instant, continuous monitoring of how well their customers are doing. And so 70% of the features they're designing into that are features that arise from customer needs. So it's very interesting, it's very integrated, and it is absolutely customer-focused, developing a standardized product. Very interesting. So another example that Dan Florizone is going to talk more about next is the example of the 3P exercise I saw in designing the hospital in Saskatchewan last year, where Dan will tell you the story, but what impressed me was that a structured way of capturing the process capabilities of the existing staff. Done a lot of Lean, analyzed the flows through the hospital, a lot of patients were involved as well in designing the ideal layout to minimize the flows and maximize the value-creating time for the staff. So it was actually the staff and the customers together, the users, knowledge that was captured. And the architects and the contractors were not allowed to say anything until the user needs had been fully articulated. And then they could figure out how to build that very quickly in a very different platform with saved a tremendous amount of both capital costs and space, but also, much more importantly, the running cost over the 40-year life of the hospital. Dan will tell you the results, but really interesting way of designing a hospital around, a future hospital around the current capabilities of the staff with obviously the opportunities as they learn. Interesting, would the architects then say, we take this knowledge and we go and tell somebody else this is what you need as a hospital? Would that work? Well, of course it won't work. Because the capabilities in a different place and the needs, exact needs in a different place are different. So actually we need to customize the design around users. That's another interesting way of getting over this paradox of what can I sell them versus how do I help them solve their problem? We can help, and it's absolutely in line with the digital age. So many ways we can do that. So, can we act our way into the digital age? Maybe. If we can, we're going to have to do some fairly radical things as we think about next generation product, process, service, and so on. If we can't, we will be disrupted. As lean practitioners, we also have to think about changing the way we work with clients from a traditional consulting model to a coaching and mentoring model. How do we do that? How do we manage the expectations of clients? How do we work with the startup guys to actually learn with them about new organization design and so on? Lots of interesting challenges. But what we're trying to do there is balance the technical opportunities, well described in that book, with the stream capabilities and the user capabilities that will enable those technical opportunities to be realized. And it's interesting that as we got into learning, we've discovered that actually lean learning through stability and frequent, daily ideally, frequent Kaizen develops the practice of improvement on a daily basis that actually beats big leaps. And it's the foundation, as I said before, the foundation of that capability allows you to actually make big leaps. So we've been often thinking a big leap or a big system and so on is the answer. In fact, it's the wrong answer. We have a challenge to figure out the management system and the management system in the future with a millennial generation with very different expectations and a customer base that will be as informed and as knowledgeable in a transparent environment as we are. We're going to have to organize very differently. A lot can be learned from lean on that in terms of the principles and so on, but there must be more examples like Spotify, I'm absolutely sure, that we need to learn from. And we need to engage users as partners. Users are no longer recipients out there. They are an integrated part of our learning process as we develop solutions for the future. So I think lean has a great deal to offer in the future. I think we still need to deepen our experience of real lean practice. There's a lot to do there. But we also need to read across and to communicate those lessons, those learnings, and a different organization model for the startup world, for the digital generation, because I think it will resonate if we do it right. And it will mean lean is relevant in the next age too. So that's what I wanted to say. Think about the legacy mindsets that you have in your head and how we act our way to learning a different way of improving the world we live in. So thank you very much. Now, as I said, last year I went to Saskatchewan looking for a Canadian healthcare example for a keynote talk that I did in Toronto later on in October. And I stumbled across this example in Saskatchewan of trying to do not just lean across the whole province of 1 million people, but to lean across government. And I met Dan Florizone. We had 2 amazing days in Saskatchewan after a very, very long flight where I was definitely jet-lagged. And nevertheless, eye-opening stuff. I talked about it at the conference last year. I managed to persuade Dan to come and talk about it this year. And so there he is. Great. So I just want you to listen to this example. I think this is one of the most ambitious examples that I've seen of trying to not just transform an organization, but transform a whole system and transform a public sector system. And we had a lot of interesting experiments where Dan, as deputy minister, which is like the top civil servant, the permanent secretary for health, then went on to become a former CEO, hospital CEO, so a real practitioner as a top civil servant, which itself is a revolution. There are a few more like you in the government, and those few people have come together and convinced the whole of government that we need to do lean right across government. Now, is Dan going to be successful? Will he be fired next week? Who knows? But this is a really, really interesting example, and that's why I'm very grateful for Dan for coming across to talk about it.